Welcome to Threads of Enlightenment, a podcast devoted to helping you overcome challenges in your life that prevent you from becoming the best version of yourself. Each episode features interviews with people from all walks of life about their journey of self-development and the principles they utilize to overcome their fears to achieve their desired outcome. Ready to be enlightened? Here's your host, Ken Primus.
Welcome to another episode of Threads of Enlightenment, guys. And you know, this is my favorite space, and I will never, ever stop doing this and saying it, so get used to it. Just to welcome our guests, because I know they're coming with a couple things I deem very expensive, their time. What a precious commodity that has been offered to every mankind, 24 hours. Man, when I was young, I misused that time. I didn't understand the value. I didn't understand how precious she was. But as I began to get older and gain some understanding and wisdom, I understood that I have a precious and powerful partner. And so Mark is coming here to spend some of this expensive stuff here with us. And so we want to honor him for that, because I know how time is, because once it is given, it is gone. And so the other is his journey. The journey is a powerful creator. It created Mark. It created me. It created all of us. And so we want to honor him for coming, because that journey deposited a couple of things into him that we want access to today. Those things, I call it those flavorful stuff that we call wisdom, that we call knowledge, that we call understanding, that we call insights. All of those things are inside of Mark, and we want to grab and pull and tug so that we can become better human spirits while we're here on this planet. Mark, welcome to Threads of Enlightenment.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
It's an honor, man. As I mentioned to you, the first question that I usually ask everyone is, how do you serve mankind? And Mark, I ask that for my audience as well, so that it's a reminder to them that this time on this planet Earth is not just about the self. It's good that we get a chance to experience and learn about the self, but it's also about serving each other. We have to learn how to reach down and pull someone up and show them the greatness that is within them. And so the question is, how do you serve mankind?
Well, I'll start with my dad's favorite prayer was others. And he led by example. So he always thought about others, I think, before himself. So that was ingrained in me pretty early on. And with my mother, she was more of a, would teach us by example. But also very caring about others and especially animals. We grew up with this lady who just loved animals, the smallest ones being the little mice that we had, and she would stay up and try to nurture them back to health if they were not doing well and things like that. So we watched these little, I would say little miracles, especially with the little pets that we had. And so that was in me, and that's what kind of led me on my journey, which is what my book is about. And I think by sharing my story, or I hope by sharing my story, it will open other people's eyes and hearts to care about others, especially their loved ones. And so I'm hoping to inspire others to do that and think less of themselves and more about especially the ones they love, but also strangers too. If we all thought about or cared about our neighbors and the people we see on the street that may need a hug or may need a favor or something like that, how great this world would be.
Yeah.
And so I'm hoping my story will resonate. Well, so far it seems to be resonating, but hopefully it will inspire others to think about others.
I absolutely believe that's why you're here. One of the golden rules that we heard and the commandments, I remember being in church and the disciples asked Jesus Christ about the greatest of all the commandments. He says to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and thy might and thy strength. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. So we know what the problem of the world is.
Yes.
From that statement right there.
Right.
He laid it out for us. And so we know that a lot of people are not in love with themselves, and that's why they treat the neighbors the way they do. But when you learn to honor yourself, respect yourself, Mark, you get a chance to understand the value of that statement, that parable, that scripture, all the different terminology that he used to say it, because it is a powerful statement that shows the state of mankind, if you will, within a few words. One of our customs, Mark, that we do, and you started, and I'm kind of excited that you did, was that we visit certain spaces that we reside for a few years. I call them spaces. The first space that we hang out is with the family, and we have mom and dad there. And you started to talk a little about mom and dad, and you gave us some insights as to these two individuals about the love and by actions and so forth. What was Mark's existence within that framework of you having both parents showing you different parts of acting and caring for each other? How did you manage yourself in that space as a young child?
Well, we all grew up in a pretty strict Catholic family. I had, there's 6 children. So I have 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters, and one younger sister. And the first 5 all went to Catholic school up to a certain point. I started public school in 4th grade, but that certainly taught us, the basics, what's right and wrong, and things like that. Though I was certainly no angel, and I had 2 older brothers who tortured me a good part of my early life. I am now taller than both of them. And so revenge may be coming, may not be coming, but that looms hopefully in their thoughts. But all of us, I think, are good human beings, mostly because of our parents and watching their example. And I have to say, both of them weren't like major teachers as far as telling us what to do. They showed us what was proper.
Yeah.
And so, we learned, whenever a woman came into the room, and some of this stuff is lost nowadays, my dad would always stand. My dad would always hold the door for any woman. He would always let them go in and out, especially in church, the pews first and last. And those were lovely. And I still do that today. I hold my girlfriend's car door, and mostly any other door I let her pass through, because that's kind of ingrained in me. And I think I tell people, they look at me funny sometimes. Chivalry is not dead, and I think we need more of it. And that was by example. And my mother was a very loving, nurturing person. Both parents worked full time, so my mother was a proofreader for the largest newspaper at the time, the Bergen Record in New Jersey, and my dad was a chemist. And my mother worked a graveyard shift. So we were on our own quite a bit. So all the kids are pretty independent. And we all at one point owned our own businesses. And I'm not sure if that's because people were afraid to hire us or we were just ambitious. So I'll let the jury still out on that one. So I had a good upbringing, and I think all those lessons, come around when the parent-child role was reversed in my life. All those lessons, and I think those lessons are told in the book through flashbacks that led me on this new journey. And when you think about it, like you say, with time, and time is a precious commodity, boy, as we get older, it seems to go so fast.
Yeah, it does.
Lightning fast. I think it gets even more and more precious as we start getting older. I won't say we're in the second half of the journey, but I'm in the second half of the journey, and it's.
I'm going to deny it, man. I'm going to deny it, man.
You got to fight it as long as you can. But if nothing else, it makes you realize how precious those minutes are.
Yeah, it does.
So I was a very fortunate guy, and I have a motto that I believe in. I've had a pretty adventurous life. I had a good career in design, and I guess serendipity, or we talked about whether it's destiny or whatever. But I was very lucky in, I went to Ohio State University originally for medicine, and decided that medicine, I wanted to be an eye surgeon since I was a young kid. But I had a very strong creative side, and that was instilled in us by our mother. And so when I got to college, I said, boy, I'm going to be in school specializing for 12 years with all these nerds that I didn't like hanging out with in high school. So what can I do? And I was lucky enough to find industrial design, which I didn't even know existed, but that married math, science, and art. So it was like the perfect combination. And that was just, I have no idea how that happened. And Ohio State at the time happened to be one of the top 3 schools in the country. So that was a very lucky move for me. And then I because of the creative side, started calling me. In 1984, I moved out to Hollywood to study and become an actor for years. So I did that for 28 years, still designing on the side. But and that's certainly a tough business. Design is a tough business also, but I always go into, my motto is find the joy. And no matter what adventure I go on, I say, I'm going to make this as fun as possible, and I'm going to find the joy in it. And even if I fail, because I've done a lot of startup businesses that have failed, but I've learned from each one of those, and each one was exciting. And I got what I could from it and then moved on to something else. The attitude is what kind of saved me throughout this whole thing. Saying, if I'm going to find the joy and I'm going to have some fun, no matter what I do and how difficult it is, that's what I do. And hopefully that will be somewhat infectious and contagious with people around me, and they will maybe get something out of it as well.
Man, Mark, I think I'm going to end the show right there, because that's the whole key to life.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, because, what that does is set one's mind. It creates a mindset that when you live that way, you're not allowing the negative side to steal your joy, not to steal your victory, not to steal your learning, not to steal. I hate the word failure, Mark, and I would love to find a better word for it, because all of the things that we do, I don't believe we've ever failed at anything. I think we've learned more so than failing, if you will, from your entrepreneurship adventures. I don't think that you failed. I think we learned that particular thing didn't work out for me, but it doesn't negate me pushing through to get my stuff done and try another round. I think we all learn from those things. One of the things that you'd mentioned early on, I remember in my culture, we had a little saying, manners make the man. And so we came from the old English system, man. And so we had to learn to do all the things as a state, open the door for the woman when the ladies came into the room, stand and all that stuff. And so all of that stuff was poured into me as a young man. Manners make the man. So you have to learn how to respect others and so forth. And one of the other things that you mentioned, that this family of young ones became entrepreneurs. And I think that terminology, entrepreneur in itself, affords that individual or those individuals a different mindset than plugging into the default program that says that you have to work 9 to 5, you have to do all this type of stuff. It creates a different mindset. It allows that individual to go beyond the program, if you will, the normal route. And it gives them an opportunity to be expanded, Mark, in a way, to look at self, to see how one can move things. Whereas I believe an entrepreneur begins to develop serious critical thinking skills, if you will, when they're, and you guys started at a young age, and you told about your progression into industrial design and so forth, and the marrying of all of things. When you were there in the, I know you would skate over it a little, when you were there in that field, because there's a lot of skill and processes that one can learn within that skill, that's arena of industrial design. How did you feel, and what type of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding did you start to gain and acquire as a young man, tapping into more of your arts side than, how were you being formed, if you will, as an individual?
Well, in industrial design, it was, I wonder if I did any of this before, but there's a buzzword now called human-centered design.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned this in college. So I learned this in the early 80s. And one of the design firms I worked for was one of the leaders in human-centered design in the late 70s and throughout the 80s. And they were, again, I was very fortunate to work for them, one of the top agencies in the country. So human-centered design, you have to know what the end user or if you're doing, let's say, a brochure or a logo, how the audience will perceive your work and the message that you're trying to convey. And what is the best way for that end user to receive that message? Because communication, you can communicate and be the best orator in the world, but if a person on the other end doesn't understand it, it's not communication. It's just mouthing off. So you have to really take into the end user. And if it's a product, empathy, I think, would be a big word involved with human-centered design. You have to understand that person, understand, like you could say, put yourself in their own shoes to see what colors they would respond to, what kind of machine and where you would have to place the buttons. Where do you place a photograph in a brochure where it's going to get the eyes that you want, let's say, to start the story? So it's going to be, let's say, the upper right corner. So that's where you put your most important either headline or photograph or something like that. So those lessons, I had no idea, I think, at the time, but how much they've paved the way for my life, because I've always used design and the lessons of design, and no matter what I've done, even when I was doing the acting thing and the writing thing, but especially when I was jumping in and doing the caregiving for my mom, because design, acting, comedy all came into play once the decision was made to do this. And yeah, so I would one of the key words out of that is, the human-centered design thing would be the empathy, to really put yourself in whoever's shoes, what you're dealing with in the situation at that point.
Yeah, that's why I brought you back to that industry, because I'm familiar with the human-centered design. I've talked to a couple of folks about it and interviewed and did some reading myself. And I know that is one of the things that you learn. That's why I said some of the processes, because that's human-centered design process or approach is very important. Once you're exposed to it, it becomes it becomes imprinted on you, even at a subconscious level, and you'll find yourself approaching life and all the different things with that process in you, because you spent so much time there. So once you decided to move forward and you went into the acting, and when you were there, again, because you were acting and stepping out is still a part of like an entrepreneurial kind of individuals. You still have that mindset stepping out there. When you were in there and going into that area, Mark, stepping from, and you said you were still doing some of the design and so forth, when you were heading into the acting, when you got there, what did you started to find out about Mark?
Well, my main thing was I wanted to be a good actor. So I started studying from day one when I arrived in LA. I had a connection with an agent, and she recommended a particular acting coach. And so I started studying right away. And I had a goal also. Goal setting has certainly helped. So I said I wanted to be a good actor. I didn't want to be a flash in the pan. So my goal was to get on Hill Street Blues, which was one of the top shows at the time. If you got on that show, then you achieved a certain level of, I think, respect in Hollywood. And less than 2 years later, I got on Hill Street Blues.
Wow. But
design is what helped me get on there, because I learned marketing from my design experience. So I kind of introduced myself to a lot of the movers and shakers in Hollywood. And the casting directors are really the gatekeepers when you first get out there. So I would send your headshot and your resume, which was pretty sparse at that point. But I had a nice designed letterhead. And one casting director called up and said, I got good news and bad news. This is not about acting, but I know good design and I like your letterhead. Are you interested in designing the national logo for the Casting Society of America?
Wow.
So all these gatekeepers, I had the opportunity to meet with them and design their national logo, which I did. And I met the casting director of Hill Street Blues. So we, a number of those people were still really good friends. And so I designed their logo. And then now that they kind of knew me, they said, okay, are you interested in this part? And so luckily at that point, it was, 2 years in. So I wouldn't say a great actor, but a pretty good actor. So I nailed the audition and I got that part on Hill Street Blues. So
that's awesome.
Design was very helpful from the very beginning in Hollywood.
Yeah, that's why I went back there, Mark, because I know how powerful that thing is, that process, if you will, once you get an understanding of human mindset, human behavior, it becomes very effective in your life because I've utilized it many, many times in my life. And it also, as I said, it creates a mindset how one approaches. You talked about joy. What a powerful tool to partner with through your life when you're approaching going into anything. I tell people find these tools that are out there that you can partner with. Meditation is a tool, journaling is a tool. You have all of these different tools out there that you can utilize to access the mind and put yourself in certain states where you're constantly there no matter what happens and comes in your life, you find that joy because once you are approaching life in that lane, if you will, the other lane is not that important. Even though you may be going through some tough time, it's not the lane that you're focusing on. You're focusing on how can I find the joy? And once you focus that way, I'm telling people, I hope you guys that are, and Mark, I always invite my listeners to learn to transition to hearing because when they hear, they become active or proactive and they begin to do things. When you're listening, you just, you go to another podcast. But I invite them, Mark, to come and become a hearer because once they begin to hear what Mark is talking about, his wisdom and all the different things that he's doing, you're going to want to get some stuff done. And Mark is talking about a lifestyle, a mindset that he has been working with and partnering his entire life, and that is to find the joy in every single situation. And look what it has rewarded him with. And everything, when you begin to walk in that mindset, people say that the universe conspired to make things happen to you when you're in the quantum field and all these stuff. And then you have the religious folks will say that God is doing it. I'm a religious man. I believe in God, and I believe God has plans because it tells us that He has plans. And we had Mark says, I don't know how it happened, but, and that's how we always say, we don't know how it happened, but there was some stuff the way that Mark is practicing his life that is making that stuff happen. Here you are, Mark. You've achieved something in 2 years, man. You set your goal, another tool that you need to utilize to achieve things that you want to have. And he set his goal and he was able to do it in 2 years. You made your achievement, Mark. You're living the high life, as they say. What was
Well,
going
I
on there?
achieved that, and then again, as a normal actor's life is, I didn't work again for 7 months. Yeah, so you have to fill that time in with a lot of other things. I mean, including you continue studying and stuff like that. But luckily, I still had design work to do, so I wasn't a starving actor. But it's a tough business, so you have to you have your ups and downs certainly, and when you hit, let's say, that crisis moment, then the phone rings and you have an opportunity for a job, and then you go, yeah, I love this business again. So it's crazy, but you learn to roll with it because you have to. Otherwise, you leave the business, or you certainly become a grumpy has been or whatever. So there's definitely that there, and I didn't want to be that way. So again, it helps to say, listen, I understand this is a terrible time, but it's okay. My sights are in the future and that end goal, and so you take it all. May I tell you a Hollywood story that I thought was very
Yeah,
cool in that
please,
first?
please.
Okay, so I'm playing an attorney in the Hill Street Blues, so involved with the courtroom scene, and I was very lucky because actually that week I got a small part in a independent film that went way into overtime. And if you're a union actor, overtime is great. Overtime is even better. So I was into making a lot more money than I was contracted to because of the overtime. And then I get Hill Street Blues, which went into like double golden time.
Yeah.
So we're there for about 11 hours. And in the courtroom, they have people sitting around. They're, let's say, extras. They're just
Mhm.
sitting there. They don't say anything. They just sit there. They have to fill in the courtroom. And there was one gentleman had to be in his 80s. And again, I'm watching this man throughout this day where everybody's exhausted and he's having the best time of his life and just taking this all
Yeah.
in. So I sat with him during one of the breaks and I'm kind of hinting, don't you have something better to do, with your life than sit around here? And because it's a lot of waiting. You
Yeah.
wait. And then all of a sudden they say action and you have to deliver. But this gentleman is having the best time. So he said, no, I love being around you young people and you creative people. And he goes, it just gives me energy and I just love being. And then he said, my daughter owns this studio. And I'm saying, who's your daughter? Mary Tyler Moore was his daughter. And so he just liked hanging around where his daughter would be. She
Yeah.
wasn't there presently, but it was MTM Studios, which I didn't put that together until I sat and talked with her dad. And it was
Wow.
just a very, very cool chance meeting. And
Yeah.
I was lucky enough to, sit down and engage with this gentleman. And it was just very, very cool.
That is awesome, man. Here you are. Again, the life is, you're moving, you're growing, you're on your own, doing your thing. And life, as they say, has a way, Mark. I remember sitting before this guru one day and she said, let life disturb your comfort. And those words jumped from her mouth straight into my, and it took me a couple of years to understand what she was talking about. But yeah, life has a way, Mark, of coming in and disturbing our comfort. Talk to us about when life came into your world and began to disturb your comfort and the decisions and the pathways that you had to make it decide which one you want and how did you make those decisions to choose your current space?
Well, I guess we'll go back to the Hollywood thing. So after a while with Hollywood, I mean, I enjoyed the thrill of it, and but there is a level that seems to be you have to make a sacrifice that not everybody does, but there's a lot of shenanigans that go on in Hollywood, and I had
Yeah.
opportunities to, let's say, get on the fast track if I was willing to, let's say, compromise my morals and stuff like that, and I refused to do that. And then you get to a point where you say, okay, is this really that important to me? And so that's when I focused more on other businesses or other entrepreneurial ideas. And one of them was, and again, life happened. So my dad, when I was a kid, invented this lovely snack he called Nutrinuts. That was a half pop popcorn. He had
Hmm.
6 kids, and I think he feared impending dental bills. So he wanted to come up something that was as addictive as candy. And
Yeah.
junk food started happening. McDonald's started sprouting up all over the place. And this was his half popped popcorn. And he mixed it with soybeans at the time because he knew the soy had some nice protein to it. And the popcorn was the draw, especially for kids. And so this became a family secret and a family snack. And he had different opportunities in the 60s, 70s, and maybe even early 80s, where he had some big companies that were interested, but the deal they were offering wasn't attractive to my dad.
Yeah.
And the process of this isn't really complicated, but it's a dangerous process and very messy. So, as in the 90s, my family, I have no children, but my nieces and nephews started sprouting out, and they heard about this Nutrinuts. And I was thinking, boy, what a shame that they didn't have an opportunity to taste this stuff. So I asked my dad for the recipe. He was done with it at that point. And so I started making it in LA. And I should have, well, I'm glad I didn't follow the omen because I almost burned down my apartment the first time I cooked it. And I said, okay, that's either a good omen or a bad omen. You got to, work harder. But the end product tasted great. So I said,
Yeah.
okay. So I introduced the family to this, reintroduced my siblings and friends and things like that. But for the nieces and nephews, they had the same reaction we did as kids. So my goal was to honor my dad by starting a company, the snack food company. And so I was working with my dad on it. And unfortunately, he passed before we actually got into the stores. But I went out and started doing research and found out that there was nothing like it still in the market. At this point, it was in existence for over 60 years or 40 years. And so I said, well, I think we have something here. So I started distributing it in Hollywood.
Hmm.
There was a gentleman, Famous Amos, who just recently
Yeah.
passed. He made a
Yeah.
great chocolate chip cookie,
Yep.
and that was his calling card in Hollywood. Well, Nutrinuts was my calling card, and it was going over like gangbusters. So eventually, we got in the stores and became a nationwide brand. So my focus from acting, it was more important to, I think, honor my dad by having his snack go out and have the world enjoy this. And we were the snack of the day on the Rachel Ray show at one point, and then we got national distributors after that, and it was a lovely time. It was a crazy time because it ended up being Mark doing all the cooking. I designed all the equipment, and we couldn't get a big manufacturer to maintain the quality that I wanted. And so I ended up building my own factory and designing it where it could be almost a one-man operation. And I was on the West Coast, and my brother was on the East Coast handling sales for stores on the East. So it was fun, and we did that for about 15 years, and we had a good run. But when you're competing with the big boys,
Yeah.
they can cause you trouble. If they can't buy you, they can make problems for you. So we were organic snack, and we had organic popcorn, and sometimes we couldn't get organic popcorn because they would
Wow.
swoop in and buy all
I
the
always.
supplies.
Yeah.
So, but that was more important. So I let the acting career kind of drift away and focus more on the snack food company. And then during the snack food company is when this incident happened with my mom. And so
Yeah.
that took precedence over everything, excuse me, everything else.
Can you guys sell part of it and get a percentage of the deal, something like that, a
No,
residual?
it never worked out. We just let the company die out.
And
We had one company was interested for a while, and then some copycat people started popping up. And so I'm not even sure if the copycat people are around, but I still have a Facebook page. We renamed it Grandpa Poe's Originals because I wanted my dad's name associated with it. And I still get old fans on the Facebook page saying, "Oh, we missed this product," and I said, "Well, that's great. So I'll give you the recipe. You can go ahead and do it."
yeah, that's what I'm saying. You should sell a recipe like Colonel Sanders did, man, with Kentucky Fried, and you got residual.
Yeah, but he took, I think, 1,000 rejections
1,000
before he found
rejection, yeah.
someone interested. So
Yeah, with 1,000 rejection. I think he turned 65 and saw his first check and freaked him out.
probably, yeah, yeah. I think he did okay, better than we did. But we had a nice run. Again, I learned a lot from it,
Yeah.
from very humble beginnings to burning down my apartment to having this gorgeous factory. And we sold the factory just last year.
Wow.
And so we had made a nice profit from the factory because it was a good project. So again, all the design came into focus for designing the equipment and also the factory and things like that. So it was my life experience all kind of paid off on that particular enterprise.
I tell Mark, I tell people this thing. It doesn't matter if you work at McDonald's, if you work flipping burgers. It doesn't matter if you make fries or whatever. Life has a way of using all of those skills as you move through life. Because I try to encourage people, no matter what you're doing, don't be discouraged. Always keep a plan, as Mark had said in the onset. Introduce joy into your life, and it'll help you. It really will. It'll help you to reset many things. When people are getting depressed because of certain things, and you introduce joy in your life, it will change your mind state. And when you change your mind state, it will change your life. That's how it works. So here you already had mom, the situation mom came in, dad exited this particular plane, and he went on to the other plane, the other dimension, as they say. And mom is here before you. And you have this decision to make. What was that like? How did you begin to manage your life? What did it take for you to do what you did? And what was that process like?
At the time, okay, so the acting career was kind of petering out. The design, well, I still always did some design work to make some extra money if we needed it. And then the snack food business, we hit a rough time. We lost our national distribution and stuff like that. So I get a call from my brother who was in New Jersey. My mother was living in the house we all grew up in. And we had people upstairs kind of supervising household duties and helping her with cooking and things like that. She could still walk and manage, but she wasn't allowed to drive anymore. And we wanted someone to have some keep her company.
Yeah.
But she didn't like them, and they didn't like her. We found a little bit later. So she was very depressed and just seemed to shut down. So shortly after her 89th birthday, my brother called me and said that Mom just shut down. She's like in a semi-comatose state. I put her to bed. I called the doctor. The doctor said she's going, so call hospice. And hospice cut off all food and medication. And that was it. So we all came home to be with her. We were on death watch. She didn't open her eyes. She didn't speak. Once in a while, she opened her eyes and looked in the corner of the room, which was very interesting. But she responded to touch a little bit. And for several weeks, this was it. We had a priest come in and deliver the last rites. And my younger sister and I hung out with hospice because we didn't know how long Mom was going to be with us, but we wanted to take care of her as much as possible. So we were really good students and learned all the tips and tricks that hospice could teach us, and handling any, let's say, medical needs, because she had bed sores at that point, which should not have happened if she was properly cared for, and how to change the bedding with a helpless patient in bed and sponge bathe her and things like that. So we learned all that stuff, and we stuck with it. After several weeks, she kind of snapped out of it. So I had a chapter in the book I called Silent Scream. So I think she was crying for help. She wanted love to be back in the house. There didn't seem to be any there. And when she snapped out of it, I decided that she deserved better. And so I needed to do something about it. So I stayed with her for a few months, and then hospice was going to stay on for, I think, a total of 6 months. But the people upstairs were remaining, and we had someone who was helping her with personal hygiene at that time that wasn't great. And she was remaining in place because my brother, who lived in New Jersey, hired them. And he's a good soul. I call him my brother Teresa. He will give everybody or anybody a break or several breaks. And I thought these people were long past their the breaks that they got, but they remained for a while. So I decided by the end of the year I had to move back in to my childhood home. So my first child was at that point, she was just about to turn 90. And my 90-year-old mother was my first kid. And the decision to do it was easy. Working out the logistics took a little time. But again, you make that decision, and the world seemed to support my decision. And so everything kind of worked out. They all kind of worked together. So it ended up being a lovely experience for me and for my mom, because again, once I did ask her for permission, and she was all in on wanting me to come home. And I had a really good relationship with both my mom and my dad. So I got them to open up about things that they didn't open up. They were depression babies, and they always kept things very close to the chest. So I got them. I was a very curious kid, so I got them over the years. So anyway, it was a easy decision for her and also for me. And so I told her, if I take this on, we're going to have fun. That was the first lesson. And she was game, because the house again was filled with love, and it wasn't all roses and stuff, but it was, again, I went in with that mindset, and she trusted me, and for the most part, it was a delightful experience, I think, for both of us.
Yeah, I mentioned to you, Mark, I know some of that, the process and the decisions that one makes to get into that position to become a caregiver. And for me, I mentioned to you on the onset, I had to do something similar like that. Both my mom went for an operation, and the surgeon made a mistake within the operation, and she died. She went into coma. She died, and a simple mistake, a rookie mistake, actually. And she went into coma for a couple of weeks, came out, and became, as they say, an invalid, where she couldn't move or whatever. And one day I was working at the time, and my dad was also declining. And I came I worked for a skilled nursing facility at the time. So anything happened, we had nurses, we had all those caregivers there. So anything happened, everyone would call me, and I'm always there. I find myself, I was there more at my parents' house than I was at work, going back and forth. And so I told the work that I am going to resign and become a caregiver like you. Because what prompted it, Mark, was usually my habit was after I came home from work, I would stop at my parents' house. I made sure everything was okay before I went to mine. The caregiver had left, and I'm talking to my parents, and my mom, she made in her diapers, and I remember sitting there and smelling her. And at that moment, I realized that my relationship with my mom and my dad, everything is going to change right there from that day. And I became their caregiver for, I think, a year or two after that. And it's a noble position, but it's a difficult position as well. Because I remember one of my friends called me up and said, there's hotlines to help caregivers because there's a burnout phase and all that stuff that you go through. And so any of you that have been through or going through that type of stuff, seek help. I'm going to give you guys Mark information so you can get in touch with him. Buy his book, man. Grab onto that knowledge that is there because it's in those pages as to how he handled and how he dealt with certain things. But we're going to give you all access to him so you can tag him and get in some information because he's familiar with that. Also, myself, I'm familiar with that. There's organizations to help those for burnout with that. So find them. There are a lot of local places in your neighborhood. They're out there because it is a phenomenon amongst caregiver where they burn out and so forth, and because they're giving all the time. So talk to us, Martha. How did you handle some of that process? Because you did say we're going to have fun, but then there's also the body that we have to deal with, and the work that goes into that, and the emotional highs and low that is part of that process and that decision. How did you manage yourself in that? How did you replenish? How did you keep Mark healed? How did you keep him strengthened? What were some of those ways that you did?
Well, part of it was when we were with hospice, my sister and I would take breaks.
Yeah.
And it was normal. But when I took on the 24/7, I didn't do that right away. I was kind of supervising at first, and I was doing some design at my brother's offices to make some money. And we couldn't find a full-time caregiver that was going to work out. So that's when I decided to take it on. Again, if you focus on the job, and mom could be a tough cookie, but you see her smile and pucker up for a kiss, or enjoy a meal that you cook, that really helped.
Yeah.
When your 90-year-old mother pees on you, not so great. Yeah. But her reaction, she had a very good sense of humor. Both of my folks did. And one night I was getting her ready for bed, and I gave her sponge baths in the morning and also in the evening. And I'm getting her ready, and I just finished putting the baby powder on and giving her a massage and stuff, and just about to button up the diaper, and she starts peeing. And I'm going, Mom, why now? And she said, it's natural. And she smiles, and you go, how can I be angry? She,
Yeah.
So she helped quite a bit. But it's one of the things I did do. Again, if you focus on, let's say, your patient, or certainly my mom, I wanted to make it. I'm a bit of a romantic, I guess.
Yeah.
So one of the first things I did is I wanted to buy her a new wardrobe. She had these drab day dresses and things like that. And if you want to make a woman smile, a new wardrobe will do it at any age.
Yeah.
And I went out and did some shopping and got her some new nice, beautiful, bright colors that she looked good in them. She still had really good legs for 90-year-old. And so I wanted to show off the legs. And then I created a thing called Day of Beauty.
Yeah.
So again, by helping, I guess, me get over the stress and stuff like that, I threw more and more things at her to make her feel better, and that certainly made me feel better. So she worked full time. She had 6 kids, but she treated herself to weekly trips to the beauty parlor where she had a shampoo and set, and she had beautiful natural nails. She was a nail model in her late teens and early 20s. And so she had her nails done. And as a kid, I once in a while would try to paint her nails and practice and stuff like that. I wouldn't say how successful I was, but I did become an artist, so maybe I was okay.
Yeah.
So I called this thing a day of beauty. So normally I gave her a sponge bath in the morning, but on the weekend, we first did this on a Sunday, and she said, being a good Catholic girl, we can't do this on the Lord's Day. So I had to move it to Saturday. And so we had she could no longer walk after this incident. So we had a Commode bedside. And so when she was on the Commode, I would soak her feet in Epsom salts. I would shampoo and dry her hair and put it in a ponytail or a braid. Now, I grew up with 3 sisters, so I learned a lot of these things other than put the toilet seat down. So that was some valuable lessons I learned from the having sisters. And then I let her pick her own wardrobe and gave her a massage and tended to any medical needs. And then finished it off with a nice bright red lipstick, and then did her nails. And the first time I just thought, this is a nice thing to do, no big deal. As I'm wheeling her in to the kitchen for breakfast, we have a big mirror in the dining room. And so I parked her in front of that mirror, and I just leaned in and whispered into her ear, "Who's that pretty girl?" And she just beamed.
Yeah.
And it was amazing that she was so happy with how she looked. And I don't know when the last time she even looked in a mirror, but I certainly, the beauty parlor visit, I can't remember the last one, and I don't think she could either. But also, when did she last feel beautiful?
Yeah.
You know, and so that was another lesson I learned, that wanting to feel pretty and handsome for the men does not go away with age.
Yeah.
So you have this 90-year-old woman now who's just beaming. And so every morning on the way to breakfast, I would park her in front of that mirror and ask her who that pretty girl is. And so it was lovely. And then it was infectious because everybody who saw her saw how happy she was. It certainly, I mean, she lived, the journey in the book is 3.5 years. So she lived another 3.5 years from this, I guess they called it kind of a death wish in the beginning. And a lot of that was just, you know, making her, it's my mom, but also making this lady feel pretty and appreciated and respected, and adding some, returning some dignity to her. That was very important. And then I also, the surroundings weren't great. The house that we grew up in needed some repair. So over those 3.5 years, I renovated the entire house and kept her apprised of all the work that was being done. And I would carry her down to the basement. That was the first floor that I did. And she got a big kick out of it. And so it was important to return not only dignity to her with the new wardrobe and the Day of Beauty, but also to her surroundings. And so she really liked the house.
That is awesome, Mark. And all of you guys that are listening to us and just focusing on the conversation with Mark. And those of you that are caregivers, man, we know what Mark and I understand where you're at. We understand your sacrifice. We know what you're doing and the cost of it. And we want to compliment you and want to encourage you that you're not alone. There's others out there that you can tap into, Mark being one of them, myself. And I'm going to provide all of Mark's links and so forth again for you guys to get access to him, because as I said, he knows how this journey is. And when you can tap into someone that has been there before, you can gain some additional insights, anecdotes as to how to try and do different things. As he stated, Day of Beauty was absolutely a brilliant approach, and how it made his mom feel. So I'm sure he has a couple more of those things, and you guys can tap into that. Okay, here you are, Mark. You were able to be a servant to mom for 3 years after. You placed all of that knowledge, the insights that you've gained in a book. Talk to us about the journey of that and the worlds that it opened up for you as a result of that. You putting pen to paper, as they say.
Well, I've always enjoyed recording family history. So I have I only had 8 days with my dad. I got that call from the same brother back in 1997. I only had 8 days, but I took a lot of notes because, again, I didn't know how long I was going to be with him. And I wrote jokes and screenplays and things like that in Hollywood. So writing was kind of second nature. And I knew this was going to be important. So there were certain moments with my dad and then certainly with my mom that I didn't want other family members to miss. And I didn't want to forget. So I took notes. I took a lot of photographs. I took videos of our experience together. And while I was doing this, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it. But while I was doing it, I had some friends going through similar situation with their folks. And so I would share some of my tips and tricks with them that I've learned and experienced, and they seemed to get some benefit out of it. And so I said, I think a book is going to be the best way to get this out there and share this experience. And it's not I don't call it a how-to book. It's what I did book, which was very unique, being a guy with no children and never married and any of that stuff. But my approach was somewhat unique. But there's a lot of flashbacks to our family history and things that help pave the way for me taking on this role. And a lot of that came from my mom and my dad. So the book, it's called Cup of Tea on the Commode. And my mom's favorite beverage was hot tea, skim milk, no sugar. And one day while we were on the morning ritual on the Commode, sometimes Mother Nature took a little longer than was comfortable for either one of us. So I offered a cup of tea kind of as a silly gesture. And she said, sure. And it became a hit and a staple. So Cup of Tea of the Commode is the title of the book. And and so memoir was going to be the genre that I thought would be best to get out there. And I never wrote memoir before, so I do what I normally do. I did research and then started studying, and I had a memoir coach that I study with and started writing. I needed some, I had all the notes, and whenever I would come up with an idea, I would jot it down, but I needed separation from the emotional event. So it was a couple of years later. Actually, I moved to France, and Mom passed away in 2014, and I moved to France in 2016. The distance, time-wise, and also miles, gave me the opportunity. And where I live is a very cool little quiet village. And so I started writing here. And I got to a point where I thought it was pretty good. Structurally, I knew I was going to have an issue. Again, it was a new genre for me because I wanted some of these flashbacks, and chronologically, that would be kind of not such an exciting story. But if I could pepper it with stories that help support, let's say, the current decisions and things like that, I thought it could be a pretty interesting and certainly entertaining book. So I found an editor, and she gave me the first pass on it and liked it and saw the potential in it. And so then I did some more. I can't even count how many rewrites I did, and I wanted it to be published. So once I got it in pretty good shape, I started approaching publishers, and I was lucky enough to find one. And they loved the potential. They liked my voice and the quality of the writing. So again, all that experience in my life, especially in Hollywood, really helped with the writing. The writing part of it. So there we go. And so I had a couple publishers interested, but one publisher that was more interested in getting it out quickly, and the publisher I went with was the one who was more interested in quality. So they said, it's going to be about a year and a half before we get this out, and you're going to be working with our editors, and et cetera, et cetera. So I went with the quality route, and that really paid off because my editors were excellent. So it was released on Mother's Day last year. I picked that day. I thought it was appropriate.
Yeah.
Again, when you put your heart and soul into something, I have to say that the earth, the energy is all supporting this decision. The reaction from people has just been heartwarming and it's beautiful because you never know. And the reviews have been lovely. The personal notes I've received, especially from people from my hometown in New Jersey, have been amazing because I haven't been in touch with a lot of those for over 50 years. And some of them knew my parents and certainly knew siblings. But the stories they share, I mean, I've had people who've said, I read your book, and I was taking care of my mom, which is 95. Then I read your book again, and I was taking care of my mom at 96. And then she says, she wrote me a couple weeks later and said, my mom died 2 weeks ago, and I want to tell you how important your book was. It made me laugh. I could certainly relate to the experiences you went through, but the humor and the stories you told helped me get through it. And thank you. And I was like, that was just gorgeous. And I've received a few of those. I just met somebody last night in France, a lady who's from England, and she says, I read your book. And I said, how did you find out about the book? And I still don't remember how she said that, but she said, I read it because my mother passed away recently, and your book really helped, because I wanted to see how you dealt with it all. And I found some comfort in that. And so that was, I guess, an unintended benefit from this thing, because I had no idea. You have a good story, and I wanted to celebrate my mom and my dad, and people are getting some benefit from it. So it's lovely.
That is always the purpose of our pain, Mark, and our journey, is so that others would be able to benefit from it, to help them walk through their pain a little easier, if you will. Your knowledge, your wisdom, as I stated, will change their state, cause laughter, cause comfort, all of those things that we all need when we're in those hard times. Mark's book became a bestseller. I'm looking at the data here. He's elder care number 3. Elder care deals with the elderly guys, and that industry. I was pretty familiar with the industry of elder care and the skilled nursing facility and all those different things. And so when you have a book that is that powerful and reaches people from all over the place, you ought to buy that. Those of you that are listening that came across our podcast, I believe Mark came here for a purpose. And you may have been a late listener, late person on this podcast. And you just heard a little thing about people being helped from Mark's book. Buy Mark's book. We give it to those that are caregivers. Many of you have friends that are in that position right now. Buy the book and offer it as a present, as a gift, as a love offering to them, to help them through that difficult time that they are going through, and make them smile, if you will. And because of all the stories that Mark had in there, and the other wisdoms and insights that he has to how to deal with certain things. And so I want to encourage that. Another thing, Mark, I just want to thank you, man, for coming and laying yourself bare to us, talking about such precious journey with your mom and dad in your life, and sharing your wisdom here with us. And I want to thank you very much for coming to Threads of Enlightenment.
Thank you. My pleasure. And what I love about this and sharing our story is I keep mom in the present, which is my gift. So I thank you for that gift.
It is my honor, man. And again, I want to tell you guys, get his book. We're going to provide all of his links so that you can get to him and begin to offer those as presents for those friends and family that you know. Even if you're going through it, buy the book and offer it as a present to yourself so that you can get out of where you're at. Again, Mark, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Threads of Enlightenment with Ken Primus. Hopefully you're now feeling more empowered to overcome the challenges in your life, whatever they may be. Share that inspiration with others by telling them about this podcast, rating it, and of course, remember to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. For more connection, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram by searching for Threads of Enlightenment. Until next time, stay enlightened.